So welcome everybody. We now get to listen to Lior Carver, who is a longtime LGBTQI rights activist and has been working to combat faith-based homophobia and transphobia for the past decade. They are on the board of the Global Interfaith Network and Keshet Gawa, the World Congress of GLBT Jews. Lior is a transmasculine Jew currently living in Amsterdam and is a member of okay, you say it. How do I say it?
Beit HaChidush. It means house of renewal, and it's a progressive synagogue in Amsterdam that was started in 1995 by two gay men and a lesbian because queer people weren't welcome within the liberal progressive Jewish synagogues in the Netherlands.
Cool. So how long have you been?
I've been a member since 2005. Yeah, it's been a while.
Cool.
Right.
Well, it's great to have you. I'm going to just give you the floor.
Okay, thank you. Here I am taking the floor in my own office. Shalom, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to Robin Hooding the Texts. I first heard the phrase, and it was used by Rabbi B'nai Lappi. And when I heard it, I went, aha, yes, this is what I have been talking about for a long, long time. And the phrase means, I mean, if you don't know who Robin Hood is, he's a figure in English folklore and mythology, rebelled against a wicked king, and took to robbing the rich and giving it to the poor. And what I contend and what Rabbi Lappi contends is that we, the LGBTIQ people, are text poor. And we need to start robbing from the rich, i.e. those people who have traditionally held power and have withheld access to the text. We need to start robbing it and taking back our birthright. For far, far too long, we, that's LGBTIQ++ people, along with women, have been excluded from learning. We have been denied the right to learn. We have been denied the opportunity to learn and to teach. We have been written out of histories. We have been silenced. We have been ignored. And when we do actually appear in texts, those texts have been suppressed, or they have been quietly shifted away and shoved under a metaphorical carpet. And I think we need to change this. I think it is vitally important that we take back our foundational texts, because we quite simply cannot afford to leave control of our foundational texts in the hands and mouths of people who have oppressed us and continue to oppress us. I imagine that over the last few months, many, if not all of you, have heard or read of a bishop or a priest or a cardinal or a rabbi or a preacher or an imam or some other religious authority figure claiming that COVID-19 is God's punishment for gay marriage, transgender people using the wrong toilet, gender diversity education in schools, and the general wickedness and unnaturalness of people like us. And then they back up that claim with a piece of scripture. And many of us have no answer to that piece of scripture. And I firmly believe that we need to have the answers. As Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz said, of blessed memory, said, "Let my people learn." And so let's do some learning. In the chat, I would like you to put a number of how many genders you think there are in classical Judaism? If you'd all like just put a number, how many genders are there? Put it in the chat, please. Anyone? Got a guess? Matt Shy, yes. Come on, don't be shy. Okay, we've had 2, 5, 5, 6 or 7. Someone has 23, and someone else has as many as there are people. Okay, if we look at classical Judaism, keynote. Hope we can share this. It's not going to let me share this unless I quit. Oh, this is really annoying and upsetting. Okay, classical Judaism has 7 genders. There are descriptions in the Talmud and in the Mishnah of 7 different genders. And it is something that is discussed at length in all sorts of different contexts. And when we look at it, we see that it is not just idle speculation. There are 1,504 references to gender variation in the Talmud and the Mishnah. And the Mishnah was, the Mishnaic period is about 30 before Common Era to about 200 Common Era. So for the last 2,500 years, Judaism has recognized that there are more than 2 genders. So the entire idea and claim by so many people that gender diversity is a brand new phenomenon, and it was created in the late 60s by feminists and LGBT activists, is absolute rubbish. It is a way that the gatekeepers of our foundational texts have used to deny our existence, to deny us having ever existed, having existed throughout time. And when we look at these texts that describe very clearly an androgynous, a person who has both male and female sexual characteristics, 149 references in Mishnah and Talmud, 350 in classical Midrash and in classical Jewish law codes. There is also a wonderful Midrashic tradition that says that both Abraham and Sarah, whom Abrahamic faiths share as our patriarch and matriarch, were tumtumim. They were both tumtum. These are people whose sexual characteristics are indeterminate or obscured. And there are 181 references to this in the Mishnah and in the Talmud. There are 335 in classical Midrash and in law codes. So we see that our founders, our shared founders were sexually indeterminate, which I think is something that we really need to hold on to, because it gives us as queer people, as people who are gender fluid, who do not conform to the standard gender expression expected of us by a great deal of society, it gives us agency. It gives us something to look at and say, no, this isn't true. This has always been here. We have always been here. There are descriptions of an Ilonit, a person who is identified as female at birth, but develops male secondary sex characteristics at puberty. There's a Saris who is identified as male or assigned male at birth, but develops female characteristics at puberty and sometimes has a micropenis or entirely lacks a penis. We have always been here. This is one of the things that is so important to emphasize, because it shows that we are not a phenomenon that was invented along with the internet. There's another very interesting thing that's in the Torah. It's Rebecca. And they appear for the first time in Bereshit, or Genesis 24. And in that text, it calls Rebecca a Na'ar. And Na'ar means young man, which is curious because Rebecca is supposed to be a young woman. So when we look at that text, it also has this very, very curious note in it called a kere uketiv, which means read and written. And it's a little note that means even though the text says A, when you read it aloud, you read it as B. So what this means is that even though the text says young man, when you read it, you read young woman. And so this is a curious way of looking at gender and erasing this very interesting and strange gender confusion. And I think gender confusion is wonderful. I think we should all explore our gender and be ready to accept whatever expression of gender we have at a particular time and place, and whether it is male in the morning or something in between at lunchtime and female at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that doesn't matter. It's the idea of being able to express and explore that, and having and knowing that you come from a very, very, very long tradition of gender ambiguity. There are some websites that I think people should be able to access and should save into their favorites and look at, because they are really and truly vitally important. And some of them are free, some of them are not quite so free. But one of the websites that I think is vitally important for anybody who wants to gain a deeper understanding and knowledge of our foundational texts is Sefaria, which is www.sefaria.org. And it contains the Torah. It contains the entire Torah, not just the first 5 books. It contains the entire Talmud and the Mishnah. It contains Jewish writings and traditions that have been created over thousands of years. And it's all online. It's a non-profit organization. It's dedicated to building the future of Jewish learning. And you can access this living library. You can create your own source sheets. You can save your source sheets so that you have these texts, these sources, so that when someone tells you, this is what it says in our text, this is what it says in the Bible, this is what it says in the Torah, and this is why being gay or being lesbian or being bisexual or transgender or non-binary is against God's law, you can pull up a text and say, well, no, actually, it doesn't say that at all. This is not what it says. It gives you the resources and the tools to fight back against our oppressors. And I think everybody needs to have such a toolbox, and we need to be prepared to investigate that toolbox and make sure that we absolutely have access to our history, our traditions, our culture, because it belongs to all of us. It absolutely belongs to all of us. And I think that all of us need to become Robin Hoods. We need to really make sure that we are the ones who are capable of arguing our corner, arguing from a position of deep knowledge, because quite frankly, we cannot afford to leave control of our foundational texts in the hands of mostly cisgendered men. If we look at the political climate in large swathes of the world, there are populist, fundamentalist religious movements who are seizing control of governments, who are in control, and who are seeking out, who have already rolled back our hard-won rights. We see it in Poland. We see it in Romania. It's now in Hungary, it is now illegal to change your gender identification on your birth certificate and other official documents. Same thing goes for in Romania. Poland is going a long way towards outlawing or outlawing LGBTIQ people. It's illegal to teach gender diversity in schools in Poland. Same thing goes for in Russia. We have camps, concentration camps in Chechnya, where LGBTIQ people are being rounded up and put behind barbed wire. We still have so-called conversion therapy, where people get prayed over and tortured to try and turn them into happy heterosexuals. This does not work. And people justify these measures. It's also happening in America, in the USA. The people justify these measures by using, actually misusing scripture. So it's imperative, it's absolutely imperative for our very survival, for our mental health, for our emotional health, for our spiritual health, that we take back control of our foundational texts. It's a matter of life and death. And so we need to learn. We need to ensure that we are visible in our spiritual communities. It's hard. Sometimes it feels as though you're on display all of the time, that you are a walking, rolling advert for LGBTQ, so that you are always on display, you are always answering questions, that you don't get a moment's rest. But it is sadly vitally important, because, I mean, I live in the Netherlands, and the Netherlands prides itself on being a very, very tolerant country, and that anything can go here. But tolerance is just a very nice word to say, a nice way to say, I will put up with something that I do not like. Tolerance is wafer thin, wafer thin. And when the opportunity arises or circumstances change, tolerance is the first thing that people discard, and they go back to expressing their true feelings about whatever. And what we need to work for is acceptance, celebration, and embrace. Tolerance is a dirty word. I have no truck with tolerance, and anybody who tells me they are tolerant, I just think, I don't believe you. I don't believe you unless your actions actually back up whatever it is you claim to be being tolerant toward. My screen sharing isn't working. It's I have no idea how to get it to work. Wait, yay, I think it might be working. So I will prepare another document with all of the links so that everybody can actually go through them. One of the most important places I think that anybody could possibly attend, I was going to go this past summer, and it's called Svara. And it is described as a traditionally radical yeshiva dedicated to the serious study of Talmud through the lens of queer experience. And I was going to go this past summer, but of course COVID-19 put paid to that, sadly. But looking at the Talmud and studying the Talmud through queer experience and through a queer lens is a vital, vital way towards reappraising our texts and reassessing our texts, and also just becoming much more familiar with them. So it is just another tool in that toolbox, in that kit that you have, so that you can have an argument that will silence the haters. There are podcasts. There are loads and loads of podcasts. Some of them are brilliant. One of the best podcasts that I have ever found is called Judaism Unbound. they have had a wide variety of LGBTIQ plus people and subjects. The hosts, Dan and Lex, they're both heterosexual men, but they have a queer outlook in that they want to look at things from outside that cis hetero norm. They want to look to the margins because it's well known that change happens on the margins. Change doesn't take place in the center where it's all nice and comfortable and everything is always arranged. Change happens on the margins because people on the margins are marginalized. And so we work for change to make our lives more bearable. And the Judaism Unbound podcast is wonderful. I have found it quite expensive to listen to because they interview an author and then I have to buy the book. And then the next week they have another author on there and I go, ooh, I need that book too. So I've bought a lot of books, but you don't have to buy the books. You can go to libraries if you have such wonderful resources. Another resource that I think people should investigate is doing the Daf Yoni. It's a huge commitment. The Daf Yoni is a cycle of Talmud readings where you read a page, or actually 2 pages of Talmud every day. The entire cycle takes about 7.5 years. And there are a couple of websites that are really, really interesting. One is called Hadran, and it's not specifically LGBTIQ, but it is reading the Talmud from women's voices, women's scholars, and it's all done by women, which is very, very radical. Until very recently, Talmud was restricted to men. So this is quite radical. There's the Talking Talmud podcast, which is a deeper dive into the topic of the Daf. There's a wonderful Facebook group called Be Gay, Do Daf Yomi. It's on Facebook, and there's also Daf Yomi for beginners, which is very, very valuable. There are a number of books that I think every LGBTIQ person of faith should have on their shelves or saved into their favorites. One is The Torah, a woman's commentary. It's a work, it's a new look at the Torah. There was more than 100 Jewish female Bible scholars, rabbis, cantors, theologians, historians, philosophers, sociologists, and poets, as well as archaeologists. Some of them were lesbian, some of them were not, some of them identify as non-binary, but they went through and commented on every parashah in the Torah. Most of it is online. All the commentaries are online, so you can access them. And these are valuable new ways of looking at the Torah through a new lens. Anybody who is looking at our history, one of the essential books is A Rainbow Thread, which is an anthology of queer Jewish texts from the 1st century to 1969. It's marvelous. The Soul of the Stranger is reading God and Torah from a transgender perspective. It's by Dr. Joy Ladin. Yes, buy it, get it. Standing Again at Sinai is Judaism from a feminist perspective. Judith Plaskow is a lesbian, she's a rabbi, she's a scholar, and This book is more than a quarter of a century old, but it is essential. Yentl's Revenge is looking at the next wave of Jewish feminism, and it has articles and chapters in there from a wide variety of young and old Jewish feminists, and it really looks to the next wave, building on the work of people such as Plaskow. If you're a trans Jew, if you're a trans person of faith, then I cannot recommend this book highly enough. Balancing on the Majitsa. The Majitsa is the dividing barrier. It's sometimes a screen, sometimes it's a curtain, and it divides the synagogue into the side where men sit and the side where women sit. And so balancing on the Majitsa is, where do people like me sit? You know, I'm a trans Jew. I have not had significant medical intervention or hormonal intervention. So I'm technically, in some respects, a woman, and technically, in some respects, I am not. So where do I sit? Where I balance on the Majitsa. And Noach Dezmura, this book is just vitally, vitally important. It's a wonderful read. Torah Queries. In Judaism, we read a portion of the Torah every week. And Torah Queries is a commentary on the weekly portion through a queer lens. It's a fascinating look at our tradition. Judaism is very, very strong on questioning our tradition and asking questions and coming up with creative new interpretations and explanations. This is what the Mishnah is. This is what the Talmud is. It's a new way of looking at our texts, reevaluating them, and making sure that they fit. The Talmud tells us that every generation should find out the Torah for themselves anew. It encourages us to question. And I think this attitude and permission and love of questioning should be really more widely celebrated. Torah Told Different, Stories for a Pan, Poly, and Post-Denominational World. This is by Magid Andrew Raymer. Magid is a storyteller, a keeper of oral wisdom and an imparter of oral wisdom. He's a wonderful man, and these stories are, again, questions and reinterpretations of our traditions. He also wrote Queering the Texts and Fragments of the Brooklyn Talmud. There's a wonderful interview with him on Judaism Unbound. These books are essential. They are valuable resources and insights, and especially Fragments of the Brooklyn Talmud. It gives us a wonderful permission to be as expansive as we like in our reinterpretation of our texts and the way that we use our texts to enrich our lives and to be here and to be present. Many of us do not speak Hebrew, do not speak Aramaic, and so we have to rely on translations. Now, translations can be tricky. Are they accurate? Does the translator have an agenda? What are they emphasizing? What are they trying to conceal? This is what happens a lot of the time. Can someone turn off their microphone? Thank you. This is what happens a great deal of the time. Someone, a Christian, usually says, this verse in the Old Testament says X. And Jews say, it doesn't say that. A Christian says, oh, maybe, who knows? And we say, we do know, that's not in the Hebrew. And then a Christian turns around and says, no one knows what it means in the original language. And we say, yes, we do, we can read it. And the Christian turns around and says, no, no, it's lost forever. And then they proceed to interpret that text in a way that is used to propagate hate against the LGBTIQ community. So we need to find translations that are reliable, which, and if you want a reliable translation of the Torah, go to the Torah, a woman's commentary. That's a reliable translation. Sefaria has reliable translations. Here's a translation that absolutely infuriates me. It's from Song of Songs. It says, I am dark and comely, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the pavilions of Solomon. However, when we look at this, what we see is in the New International Version, dark I am, yet lovely. I am dark, but beautiful. I am very dark, but lovely. Yet lovely, but lovely, but lovely, but comely. This is a translation that, especially now, especially with what's happening in the world, with Black Lives Matter, this is a translation that is appalling and infuriating. How much harm has this translation done? It says, and. It's a vav. It's a vav. It's not a but. I am dark and beautiful. This is an affirmation of beauty and joy and pride. And it has been mistranslated and has done so much harm. So something to be aware of. Translation is very, very contentious. There's very recently there was a new translation of the Bible by the Danish Bible Society, and they just removed the word Israel almost completely from the New Testament, and they changed it several times in the Old Testament. And now they claim they're doing this so that it wouldn't confuse people. So one has to wonder what's their agenda, because if their target audience, which is Danes, are so easily confused, then to quote Shakespeare, there is something rotten in the state of Denmark. So we have to be very, very sure of our translations and make sure that we do not fall prey to atrocities such as this that erase us. Make sure that we can access translations that are reliable. Are there any questions? Do people have comments? Yes, no. How do I stop screen sharing? Stop sharing. Yay, found it.
Okay.
Other questions?
Just a sec. So there's a question, or there's more like a comment, that in the Swedish Bibel 2000, which is the I guess the Bible edition of 2000, it says, "I am black and beautiful" as well.
Yes.
So
yes. There are ones that do actually have the correct translation. But what I did was I searched just on Google, and that it goes on for 2 pages. That website goes on for 2 pages, and the 95% of the translations have some form of but, or even though, or yet. It's infuriating. Yeah. More questions.
there's a comment on saying, "Thanks, Lior. This is a very important example of how you should or should not translate the Bible." Really, that it would be. We have 15 minutes, so if you want, if anyone wants to ask a question, you can also just turn on your screen and your microphone and ask it. But if you prefer to ask it, okay, there's a comment in the Dutch NBV from 2004. The text has "and." Okay, yeah, but I think you commented on this already.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hello, can I comment and share a little? I thought this was super interesting and inspiring presentation. Thank you very much for that. And also, I will be graduating as a Lutheran student of an educator of this Lutheran state faith, whatever it is in Finland. I shall be, now I'm too nervous, but I shall be as a teacher, kind of. And I was wondering just where to find kind of the courage and focus to be a teacher with these LGBTQ topics, and just what sort of reflections would you share with this kind of ball that I'm now throwing to you?
I think you find the courage somewhere deep within yourself. And I mean, for me, the very first Pride March I ever went on, the police, it was in Atlanta, Georgia, people threw rocks and bottles at us. And the police were there to stop us LGBTQ people from infecting the protesters on the side of the road. And that anger has fueled me over the years. And the way in which people are excluded and demonized and assaulted, dehumanized, I can't bear it. I cannot stand it to sit around. I cannot stand to not try and protect my fellow human beings. I just can't. It's not in me. And so that gives me the courage to stand up and say no, and to be visible, and to teach and to learn and to make community and to work in interfaith settings, because I think that we need to reach out and share our common stories and our common humanity and our common ideas about the divine, because it's important. That my courage comes from that, and you know, not being being too old to run away from people who would beat me up on the streets. So I can't run fast enough anymore. So I am an activist. So I work for this because it's vitally important. I can't do anything else. I don't know how to be anything else than that. And I think that coming to these sorts of gatherings is very, very important, because it gives us a safe place to explore ideas, to exchange ideas, and to have community, and it energizes and enlightens and lets us breathe in and out in a safe space, which is very, very important. Also, if there's one child who does not want to cut themselves or commit suicide, or does not feel alone and abandoned by their faith tradition because of something I have said or because I have been visible, then my life is worthy. The Torah says, anyone who saves a single life, it is as though they have saved the entire world. And so I can't do anything else. I just can't.
Yeah, that was a great answer. Thank you.
There's another question. Is there a question by Tarja? Did you want to ask a question?
Actually, I want to thank Lior for being so energetic and engaging. And I think there is a lot of ideas going around in our heads. It was a pleasure to meet you in Amsterdam Euro Pride on the religion boat a few years back. Yes. And I would like to encourage everyone who is online now to be like Lior. Thank you for a nice example of how to engage and share the passion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I do have I get a bit of a question. When you were talking about the classical, the classic genders in Judaism as seen in like the Midrashes and the Talmud, that I remember when I've had a lot of LGBT Jewish friends and stuff, and I remember that there has been like this sort of ongoing discussion of whether or not these sort of genders should be allowed to be sort of how do I say, like, reappropriated for use of queer Jewish use today. And then there were some people who were like, no, because they weren't like as inclusive as some people want to make them. And I don't know, I was just wondering what your thoughts on that idea of taking old terms and reusing them with new meaning.
I don't necessarily think that we should take the old terms. I think what is really, really valuable here is the absolute recognition that we have always existed, that we have been described, and the rabbis and sages try to figure out a way to make a space for people who were gender variant, make a space and make it so that they could function and take part in society, and so that they would be accepted as society, so that people would go, oh yes, that's the Ailonit, and they are like this, and sometimes they're like a man, and sometimes they're like a woman, and sometimes they're not, but this is how they are, and they exist. And as Steinsaltz says, they exist and note must be taken of them. So I think the way in which it is useful and important is that they exist, they have always existed, we have always existed, and note must be taken of us. We are, I don't think we should necessarily reappropriate Saris and androgynos as terms, but I think we should recognize that and emphasize that we've always been here, and we are in our tradition, and we have always been in our tradition. And anybody who says that this is some newfangled Western idea designed to corrupt society is they are simply expressing their own hatred, prejudice, and sexual and gender insecurity. So I think these terms are worthy of study, but I don't think we should, I don't think it is necessary for someone to decide that they are a tumtum or whatever. I think it's in the same way that we should recognize and celebrate two-spirit people, three-spirit people, that the muksa in Latin America, especially in Mexico, I think we should recognize and celebrate these alternate, different gender expressions, and the idea that there is far more than just male and female, and that's it. I think there are terms that are valuable, and everybody should know about them, so that people don't think that, you know, gays and lesbians were invented in 1968 along with the sexual revolution and the advent of the pill.
Thank you. That was a great answer.
You're welcome.
Okay, there's a comment still. Thank you for a wonderful presentation, Lior. I love how your thoughts connect with yesterday's presentation by Muhsin. The history of theology and religious tradition has been dominated by heteropatriarchy, but it doesn't have to be anymore. And with the presentation by Brian and Shannon, as LGBTQI people, we can find ourselves and our stories in the sacred texts.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we are there. We are there in those texts, and we need to find them and celebrate them.
So I don't know if we discussed this already in the previous session with Jan, but is there a chance that the PowerPoints could be shared on the resources page?
Yes,
Yes.
I will do my best. Not being a technical genius, it's only about the fifth sort of PowerPoint keynote thing I've ever created successfully. But I will share it because the resources are there, and they should be shared widely. Yes.
Okay, there's one question. We only have like about a few minutes. It's okay if it goes a little bit over. So, but I don't know if is it a yes or no question. Were David and Jonathan just friends?
It's an absolutely no question.
Okay. There you go. All right. Yeah, oh, hold on. There's one more comment. I'm gonna.
Yeah. Hello, it was my question. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I agree that we have to take back those texts and like tell to the world that we're there too. But I was actually, I would love for you to give us like just 1 minute or 2 minutes of what to say to someone who's like, no, of course, David and Jonathan were just friends. Like how to argue with them.
Well, if you look at the way that those expressions of love, those expressions of caring, it's obvious that it's much more than just, this is my drinking and fighting buddy. It is so obvious. I would go and look on safaria.org and type in David and Jonathan and look for the resource sheets and see what's there. David and Jonathan is, there's a lot of that in Michelson's book. It's also in Steve Greenwood's book, Greenbaum. There are a lot of books. I can't give you a 2-line justification, but it is in there. It's implicit in the text. It may not be explicit, but it is implicit in the text that they were lovers. The line, and David had a love for Jonathan surpassing the love of women. I mean, what else can that mean? What else?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you for a very interesting lecture, Lior. And now we have another break for 15 minutes. Everybody grab this opportunity to stretch your legs, and we'll be back in about 15 minutes with a poetry presentation by Elias Sadak. Thank you.
Thank you.